All right. Sorry about the delay, everyone, but we're going to jump into our second session. We had a little bit of technical issues, but I think we got that taken care of. And so our next presentation is going to be about accessibility, something that I had the enjoyment to work with at the World Wide Web Consortium when they were first starting the initiative back in the late 90s. And so we have somebody here today from the World Wide Web Consortium who's probably one of our top experts on the area, and she talks and evangelizes about this quite a lot. She has a research appointment through MIT, and she's made the long visit just for this presentation for today to be with us from Madison, Wisconsin. So please welcome Shawn Henry.
All right, it's so cool to be able to talk about accessibility right after innovation. And actually, if I had realized that, we might have synced things a little bit better, because when you think about the needs of accessibility, it can really be a catalyst for innovation. So I'll leave that seed for you to think more about. But what we're going to talk about now is, for accessibility, is orchestrating organizational buy-in. So Joe said, you know, a lot of people that come to this conference, they're already convinced. They already know the importance of accessibility. So what I want to talk about is how you can help your organization get on board with accessibility. And first, a lot of times I talk where some people in the audience have disabilities, so I'm not sure who's here, so I'm going to make sure to give visual descriptions of anything that's important on the screen. And so a quick visual description. I am female, and I have a shirt on that has Braille across the chest. Yes. And the translation of that Braille is, if you can read this, you're too close. Yeah, right. Okay. So, you know, accessibility, and part of accessibility is not just all, serious, have fun with it. Let's have fun with it. I just do have to be careful if I'm at a disability conference and I say, I have Braille on my chest shirt. And they're like, oh, I'm like, no, it's a joke. All right, so I want to tell you about two organizations. There are really two types of organizations. So I started out in user-centered design, usability, many years ago, before UX was the thing, and got interested in accessibility, and had a real tough time selling accessibility. And then Section 508 came out in the US, which required some accessibility of, it required the federal government to purchase accessible products, basically. So then a lot of people started approaching accessibility as this checkbox, this thing we had to do. People are busy, they don't understand the importance. And a lot of organizations where I was consulting, it was a real tough sell. People were busy, they didn't want to do it, they felt it hindered innovation, they didn't understand it, and it was icky. It was just not fun. And then I ended up working with an organization. It was actually an e-learning company in Dublin, and they got it. And they did what I'm going to talk about at the end today, is a buy-in session. And the developers and the designers just embraced accessibility. And they were so excited about it. And whenever we came up with a problem, I'm like, oh no, this isn't working. They've been working so hard, and this isn't gonna work. And they're like, all right, another problem? Okay, cool, let's figure out how we can solve that. And they were so excited about embracing this challenge and about making a difference. And about this making their work better. And so what I want to talk about today is ways that you can help your organization be that second one, where they embrace accessibility and they understand that it can lead to innovation, and they understand that it's making a world a better place, and understand it's good for business, it's good for us as individual designers and developers and user experience people, and that accessibility is a positive thing. So that's what I want us to work on getting to this morning. We'll talk a little bit about organizational buy-in, a top-down approach, a bottom-up approach, and then getting real with accessibility in life. And in the material has all the slide text and a whole bunch of more links. So I'm not going to have the links up here. but that's in the material. You have a version from a few days ago, and then there's some additional stuff I'll put in for today. So all this is available in your, I'm going to say handout material, but it's just really electronic material. All right, so what we want to do is think about accessibility differently. When we say, what is accessibility about? You know, what do you think of? Well, a lot of people still think it's a checklist. It's that checklist item. I got to check it meets 508, or I got to check it meets accessibility guidelines, it meets accessibility standards. But that's not really what accessibility is about. People think accessibility, they think about the markup or the code, they think about passing an evaluation tool, they think about conforming to standards. But that's really not what accessibility is about. Accessibility is really about people. It's really about people using your product. It's about the user experience of people with disabilities. That other stuff helps us get there, but it's really about the people. So we're going to talk a little bit about how that all fits together. In terms of user experience and related to usability, most of you know the ISO definition of usability is the extent to which a product can be used by specified users to achieve specified goals with effectiveness, efficiency, and satisfaction in a specified context of use. And accessibility just fits right in. It's just, there's a slide missing. All right, so basically, when we throw in accessibility, it means that our specified users include people with disabilities. And we look at our specified context of use that includes a wide range of situations, including people using assistive technologies. So accessibility fits right into here. Another way to look at it is that accessibility is about designing your products so that more people can use them effectively in more situations. So it's more people with disabilities, more situations. And when we look at that perspective, yeah, it's about people, but that also leads us to the business case. That leads us to the business case. It's more people, it's more situations. So when we're talking about getting organizational buy-in, we can look at that top-down approach. And one of the big things is the business case. What's the business case for accessibility? Well, we often summarize this as 3 carrots and a stick. All right? So the 3 carrots, reason you'd want to do this, there's social factors. There's benefits to accessibility. There's technical factors. When your products are accessible, there can be technical benefits to developing them accessibly. There are financial factors. Accessible products can have increased use. They can work in more situations for more people with disabilities and without disabilities. And then finally, the stick is the legal and policy factors. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So one of the things I really encourage folks to do is to say, embrace the carrots. You know, we're aware, we'll talk about the stick in a minute, but embrace the carrots. That's the exciting part of accessibility. And when we're talking about from a business case, one of the biggest carrots, depending on your type of product, is that some customers are required to purchase accessible products. So I don't know what type of product you do. If you're developing work for that, working on products that we sell to the federal government, that's a very clear benefit to including accessibility because the U.S. federal government is required to purchase products that are accessible. This is, I know there's some people from around the world, there are international incentives as well. So whether this is software, hardware, web, if your product is accessible, it equals a competitive advantage. Now, whether it's a product that's going to be used externally or internally, if I'm developing a product that people say an HR application, then accessibility, providing accessible tools to employees is also an important factor. So in the business case, one of the big carrots is accessibility can be a competitive advantage. And this is becoming even more and more of an advantage as there's a greater awareness of accessibility and as accessibility is included in procurement. As much as I'd like for everybody to go for it just for the carrots, when we're talking from the business perspective, that stick is also important as well. So in many situations, products are now required to be accessible according to laws and policies in the US, in states, in organizations, and around the world are requiring that your products are accessible. So a lot of organizations are focusing on accessibility not just for the competitive advantage, but also to reduce the risk of legal action for having inaccessible products. So that's out there, but let's talk about the carrots. All right. So, when we're talking about the top-down, looking at the business case, that in your handout, there's a link to a business case document, and that talks all about, I had the social factors, technical factors, financial and legal policy. There's tons of information on each one of those. And that resource can help you create a business case that's specific to your organization, because each organization is a little different. So there's a resource there for that. When you're looking top-down, you can look at including accessibility in project requirements, including accessibility in performance reviews, and some other factors just to think about from the top-down. All right, so I mentioned that accessibility is about the people, and I want to get back to that because that's the exciting stuff, really, especially from a user experience perspective. So when we talk about people, we talk about people like Glenda. Glenda has cerebral palsy, so she has limited arm movement. Her speech is very affected, but cognitively, she's very bright. She's very intelligent. And she uses the computer for communication. So it's important that that everything she uses is accessible without a mouse, and she types with one thumb. Okay. Similarly, a friend of mine, Carl, lost use of his arms from post-polio, so he uses a mouth stick to type. So he just has a stick, and he uses that to type. So again, he can't use the mouse, can't press two keys at once. We didn't need to make things accessible to Carl. This is John. John started going blind later in life. He's an English professor. We often focus on blindness, and you'll notice I started with something else because there's a lot of other issues. So I'm actually not going to talk about blindness much because you probably know a lot about that. This is John Boyer. He was born blind, and he started going deaf about 8. So how does he work with a computer? Anyone know? He's blind and deaf. Braille? Yep, Braille, exactly. He has a dynamic Braille device, and it creates the Braille on the fly, and then he can just type the input. John went on to he graduated second in his class for a mathematics degree, and then he went on and got a master's in computer science with a minor in electrical engineering years ago, because the technology is accessible. So this is important. This is Wayne. Wayne has low vision, which is very different. The accessibility issues are very different from people who are blind. So even though it's both vision, when we can see, we want to use as much as we can of our vision. So being able to change the text size and font and things like that are really important to Wayne. This is Tim. Tim is deaf, hard of hearing. Another very important thing in products, especially as audio becomes more and more of an issue. And Sarah. Sarah, if you met her, you would have no idea she has a disability. She's very intelligent. She just has difficulty processing written information. So with auditory information, perfectly fine, very smart, but she has trouble processing text, words, cognitively. So this is a variety of disabilities. When we're talking about auditory, cognitive, neurological, physical, speech, visual, and we want to keep in mind this wide range of people with different disabilities. Now, another thing when we're thinking about the big picture of this is disabilities are caused by different things. So some is congenital condition, that means you're born with it. But disability is also caused by disease, illness, accident, and any one of us are subject to those at any time. You know, for example, multiple sclerosis typically strikes people between age 20 and 40 and can cause vision difficulties, physical difficulties, a wide range of issues. So even if you don't have a disability now, you or your manager or your customers could have a disability in the future. Now I have a question. How many people right now, at this minute, are getting older? Yes, we are, aren't we? We're older than we were a minute ago. Hey, guess what? Aging. Aging is another cause of disability. So as we get older, as some of us are experiencing, we have decrease in hearing, in vision, often in fine motor control, in memory, and this is an increasing target audience. So older users with money to spend are an increasing important customer base and target users. So I want to do a little activity, give you a chance to stretch and see what this is like. I'll give you an example. So what I'd like you to do is stand up. Oh, this is not my computer. I don't have this. Okay, and then sit down. All right. So next time we'll do this activity. It's really cool. All right. Yeah. Basically, the short answer is the point is that as we age, we get acquired disability, and most of us will live to 75 or older, and the percentage of disability then is 64%. So when we're thinking about accessibility, well, I love this quote. It's from years ago, and I lost who it came from, but accessibility is an act of enlightened self-interest. So that is, even if you don't have a disability now, if you understand that this could benefit you in the future, if you understand that it makes your work better, if you understand it makes your products better, then it's really self-interest. It's really an act of enlightened self-interest. All right, so it's about people. When we talk about it's about people, that has a motivation when we're talking about bottom-up. So we talked a little about top-down. Let's talk about bottom-up. One, as I mentioned, there's a lot more requests to design for older users. So design for older users. And if you go and say, right, I want to design for older users, what do I need to do? Well, we've already done all that work for you because we've been working on accessibility for years. In fact, we had a European Commission funded project a couple years ago that looked at the needs of older users to see if we already had that covered in accessibility guidelines and standards, and in fact we do. So if you're looking at older users, if you're interested in mobile design, if you're interested in designing for people with low bandwidth, new devices, all that, you can look at accessibility to know how to do that. And there's links in the handout on that. It's the right thing to do. So from the bottom up, you know, a lot of people are motivated, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in a bit. A lot of people are motivated because it's the right thing to do. You know, when you understand that your work can impact lives in a positive way, that can be very motivating. Interestingly enough, that tends to work better for user experience folks and designers, and sometimes that argument actually doesn't work with coders. Someone did a empathy study and actually found out that programmers scientifically have less empathy. Yeah, okay. So, you know, some people, they get excited about pointy brackets, you know, and then they don't care about people. So for those people, for pointy brackets, turn them on. Another approach for those folks, especially when we're talking about web accessibility in this case, that fundamentally the web is all about access. So Tim Berners-Lee, who created, the inventor of the web, has said the power of the web is in its universality. Access by everyone, regardless of disability, is an essential aspect. So it's fundamental. And we have a new, this is in your handout as well, we updated the accessibility page on the W3C, and I'd really encourage you to go look at that, because we worked a lot on the approach of presenting this to developers specifically on this page. And we talked about that point that the web is fundamentally designed for access. And so when you design right, you know, when design code, you know, develop, it is accessible. And that makes a huge difference to people being able to interact with your work. However, if you don't pay attention to accessibility, then you are actually actively not meeting the spirit of the web, and you're preventing people from interacting with your products. So I encourage you to, if you know any developers that are really into like high quality, but that's another approach you can take, is to tell them, you know, access is what the web is fundamentally all about. So those people lacking empathy, sometimes you can get them on that, you know, high quality of work. And actually, I have seen that. More and more in the coding world, there are top designers and coders who get accessibility, and being able to develop accessible products is a mark of high quality work. So for individuals sometimes, whether it's user experience, designers, coders, just having that pride of my work can be motivational as well. All right, so when we're looking at the bottom up, there are some ideas, you know, meeting the needs of a range of users, having high quality work, doing the right thing. Some of those can be very motivating from the bottom up. Okay, so now I want to talk a little bit more dive into a really specific idea on creating buy-in sessions for awareness and motivation. Because this is what made the difference. This is what has made the difference in organizations where I've seen. And that when I told you that e-learning company in Dublin, this is how we got them on the right path, is a buy-in session which gives people, your designers, your developers, your project managers, your stakeholders, a chance to really see and interact with real people with disabilities using your product or product like those. So I want to talk about some specifics on conducting buy-in sessions for awareness and motivation. And I'm going to run through these really quick. Again, the notes are in your handout, and I'm going to be writing up more details on this, but just to plant that seed and give you ideas to go on this. I'm going to say, just for something to hang it on, in a lot of cases, this will take 10 minutes, cost you about $100, but it'll take you about 10 hours to prepare. So the session, 10 minutes, $100, and these are just numbers that hang on. It'll be different for any groups, but I'll tell you about what that means. 10 minutes, $100, 10 hours. So the first thing is you need to get a clue about how people with disabilities interact with your product. And there's a couple of links in your handout for resources on text resources and videos to help you understand that. The next thing you need to do is find participants. One thing, when you're doing a buy-in session like this, where you have people with disabilities, that you use, in this case, experts. People who are expert with their assistive technologies or with whatever they're gonna be demoing and doing. You know, if you're doing usability testing, a lot of times you want people with less experience, but in this case, you want people who are experts. Pick people who will have a high impact. It's very important to realize that accessibility is broader than people who are blind. However, when you're doing a buy-in session, oftentimes participants who are blind, people who are blind, work really well for that. If you can, pick someone who's close to the audience in age, et cetera, just so they can relate well. All right, next thing is on planning your demo. So what are you going to do in the session? So if you're doing a website, if you're looking at your website, for example, then I would suggest pick a website that's similar to your organization's, or maybe pick your competitor's website, and this is a website or product or whatever you're working on. You can also look at features that you're going to be redesigning soon of your product. One of the keys is getting the right people to attend in your organization. So whoever holds the purse strings, the money, the project managers, so the high level, as well as the nitty-gritty designers and developers. So you're getting both ends there. Promise that it'll be short. So that's why I say 10 minutes. A lot of times what I'll do is plan a larger chunk of time, because if it goes well, I'll talk about questions in a minute. If it goes well, they can stay longer, but have the basic in just 10 minutes, right? We're just going to do this for 10 minutes. If you want to stay longer, you can, but I want 10 minutes of your time. So promise it'll be short, because people are busy. Another thing, serve food, right? All right, we're bringing in pizza for lunch, free food. Come on and eat pizza for lunch on Thursday. It's free. So that's the $100. Obviously, depends on your organization, how big or small a group you have. But provide food. And a lot of times, basically, I've just said, hey, we're gonna have this network or this lunch presentation, and don't make a big deal of it, and people just show up for the food. So that's good. Another suggestion is to record it on video so that you can show the people who weren't there as well. So get the right people to attend. Now when we get to actually conducting this session, the first thing is to prepare like crazy. The deal is you really want this to be a 10-minute session, but I think I said 10 hours to prepare, because you want it to go really well. And you don't want to show up and find out that the technology doesn't work and the third computer you try works, and forget that you have a presentation link that's not on the memory stick, right? So make sure that you prepare in advance. You might even want to videotape your practice session and go back and look at it. One big thing is, if you are doing screen reader, if you're using a screen reader and a projector, practice with that screen reader plugged into the projector. Because there's been several presentations I've done where we're working on it, the day before, and we practice, and it works great. And so as soon as we plug it into a projector, the screen reader and their projector don't get along. So make sure that you practice so it goes really smoothly, because you want it to go smoothly. Do introductions, figure out things where the people with disabilities can relate to the audience, relate to current events. I would not talk, for example, if you have someone from Wisconsin about the Seahawks. But maybe a little more pleasant things you can relate to, right? Things that relate to the session organizer. Maybe you know that the manager is really big into a certain TV show or a certain sports figure, and you find out that ahead of time that your people with disabilities, someone that's doing the demos has that in common. So find things like that, just first to make it real personable. Favorite sport, kids, hobbies, just to bring it to real life, that this is real life. Then the next thing is what you want to get is that wow, cool. So hopefully most people around here have seen people use screen readers, have seen people maybe even use a dynamic braille device, have seen people interact with computer in different ways, and then the first time you see it, it's kind of cool. I mean, there's some people who still think, what? How can people who are blind use the web? Use computers? And when they first see that, then it's very eye-opening, pun intended. All right, So what you want to start out with is, if you're doing like your web related to web, start out with a demo of something that the participant is comfortable with, a website that they usually use. Or if you're using like your product, make sure that they have spent a lot of time on your product. Start out with in a realistic situation. So this is not like a usability test. You know, in a usability test, well, not one where it's highly interactive. It's more like, you know, hands off. Let them show what it's really like with limited commentary. Oh, this is how I would order a book from Amazon.com or whatever. Include a more complex task and a common task, and you know that you're successful if the people are amazed. So you want to orchestrate it, you want to plan it ahead of time so that it's really amazing, it's really cool, it's really surprising, and that's the level of your success. And then more specifically, what I suggest is in this session that you focus on both accessible and inaccessible examples. So how does this, so you might show something, how this works when it's accessible. You have an accessible project. And then the same thing when it's inaccessible. And then go back and show, right, this is how it works when it's accessible. So you see this is how it should work, this is how it doesn't work, and then show how it does again. Okay. Big thing is allow question and answers. And one of the key, allow people to ask questions. One of the things we found really useful is if you have people write their questions on cards, so then they can ask anonymously. So, you know, what's it like to be blind and raise children, or, you know, whatever. These kind of questions, if you have people put the questions on cards, then they can ask anonymously, and then also then the participant can choose what they're comfortable answering or not. Okay, and then one important thing on this, and I won't talk about it, but point you into the links in the handout, is when you do a buy-in session like this, you're probably going to have, you may only have one person, you may only have a couple, and to make sure to read in the handout about individual differences, and that's something that you'll need to communicate. So, you know, in certain situations with getting a little bit of time from your designers, developers, and project managers, a little bit of money, a lot of time to prep so it goes well, can really result in, wow, cool, can result in people embracing accessibility and really being excited about accessibility. So if you're successful, what then? And I've just give you a couple of pointers to what then. Some pointers on equipping designers and developers. We know, you know, they tend to think about, designers, everybody tends to think about themselves. And in user experience, we want to help them think about all users. And specifically, we're talking about users with disabilities. So how do you do that? How do you consider a range of people with disabilities? Some resources for you are in your handout. I mentioned earlier some text documents and videos. If you're focusing on web, we have from the Web Accessibility Initiative a document on involving users in web projects for better, easier accessibility. I also wrote a book on including accessibility, mostly in user-centered design, but applies more broadly as well. That's actually out on the table, and the whole thing is free online. So that's in your handout as well. So when we talk about, you know, getting real, really bringing accessibility to life. So I think I have this on this. Yeah, okay. So just, I want to give you a couple of examples of what happened when people were focusing just on the standards and not understanding what accessibility really is, not understanding how real people use their products. So this is a couple of stories of accessibility gone bad. Right. So here's one. There's a login and password, and they have, oh, we should have access keys, so you don't have to, so you can jump there. And they had the letter bold, so you could tell what the access key was instead of having it underlined. This was in a HTML page. And so to put the bold, they actually broke up the word in the code, because they had the strong around the G in the middle and then the P in the bottom. So a screen reader read this as low G in P assword. Oops. Right. Okay. Just understanding a little bit of how real people with screen readers use your product, running through that would have avoided that. Here's another one. This is a website for the Texas Immigrant and Refugee Coalition. And they have a logo on the top of every page throughout the website. And when you click the logo, it goes back to the home page of the website. So it goes back to the home page of the website. So when you come to the screen reader, this page with the screen reader, it reads the title of the web page, and then it reads out the alt text for the logo, which doesn't say what it says. It says what happens when you click on it. When you click on it, you go back to the home page. So it says, Texas Immigrant and Refugee Coalition, go home. Oops. Oops. All right. So accessibility is about people. It's about people. And we want to think about, we talked about some top-down approaches, some bottom-up approaches. It's about getting real. I encourage you to think differently when you're working with your organizations, when you're working on getting buy-in throughout your organization. You might need to use the stick of the legal requirements and avoiding risk for legal action. But I encourage you to embrace the carrots, to realize that from a business perspective, there are business advantages, and then really as individuals in our work, that we can improve the quality of our work, we can improve the quality of individuals' lives with disabilities, we can make the world a better place. So I encourage you, as you work on orchestrating organizational buy-in for accessibility, to embrace the carrots. Thank you.